You are listening to the On Purpose Podcast, your guide to living a more purposeful life. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the On Purpose Podcast. As always, it's an honor and privilege to have you here with me again. And, man, just humbled, right? Like humbled and purposeful and acting. The word of the year was act for me, right? To act and always be creating something and moving forward and not sitting idly by and gathering information, but taking steps towards the creation of what we want to have in the world, what we're trying to create. And, you know, our goal for this podcast is to be the most impactful podcast in the world. That means impacting people's lives for the good, for the better, getting people to think outside the box, to reflect on themselves, to maybe lean into that dream, to step forward with what they're chasing. And this week, I'm excited to sit down with a writer, an actress, a producer, a mom, to share her story of overcoming doubts and a bunch of negative self-talk to life in Hollywood and challenging her limiting beliefs and using them to create the success she currently has. So I hope you enjoy this week's interview with writer, actress, producer, Katherine Norland. Katherine, my newest friend, welcome to the On Purpose Podcast. How are you today?
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
You already started off on the right foot, because I love when people say amazing to that question or fantastic. Those are like my two things.
Yay.
What's
Doing something right.
what's amazing about today?
It's every day is a day of new beginnings. Every day you get to start fresh, no matter what happened yesterday, no matter what went down, no matter how you feel you messed up or failed. It's like, it's fresh, it's shiny, it's clean. You get to write your future. You get to write your destiny, and you get to make it what you want it to be. And you don't have to dwell on yesterday or bring it into today. It can just be fresh and new.
I love it. I'll tell you, one of the things that's amazing for my morning here is I love rhyming. And like my kids always be like, Dad, why are you rhyming again? And as I was getting ready for this, I was just
Yeah.
watching one of your most recent reels, and you were doing a little poem, a little rhyme for us.
I love that. That's like my favorite thing. It's one of those little things that it's not little to me. I like love poetry so much that there was a period in my life where I felt like I couldn't even talk without rhyming. And then I would go to I was like, someday I want to publish a poetry book.
Mm.
And then I would go to all these events where they had panels of agents, and over again they would say, oh no, we don't publish poetry, oh no, we don't. And over I was like, wow, I guess that thing I love to do doesn't happen. And I would submit my poetry to different publishers, and they'd say, it's good, but we can't publish you until you're famous, like you have to be somebody. And then I was like, it was so weird. And one of them said, once you get to 100,000 followers, then we'll think about publishing your poetry. And when I got to over 100,000 followers, I was like, forget you. I'm going to publish it myself.
I love it. I love a little stubbornness in us right there. That's good.
I definitely have that.
Yeah. No, that's honestly, that's one of the benefits of social media now, is we can eliminate who controls our product, and we can just go right to consumers.
Yes. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Very fulfilling. I had some mentors out here in California for a while that would discourage me from writing poetry, because like, you can't make money at that. That's not gonna da da da. And they would tell me all the reasons why I shouldn't do it. And then I had this one mentor, and we were working on a bunch of film projects together, and he was mentoring me to become a director. And he was like, you need to stop wasting all your time working on poetry, because it's not going to go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And so we would meet every afternoon to work on stuff. And then he would ask me, like, well, what'd you do this morning? And it got to the point where I felt like I had to lie, because I spent 3 hours writing a poem before we met. And I was like, uh, just stuff around the house. It's
Uh,
like, how, what kind of a relationship can I have with someone if I have to lie about writing a poem?
yeah. Yeah,
So
I find that interesting, especially like getting ready for this. I see that, like, you know, you do a lot of Well, even that poem was talking about quit doubting yourself and the voice that says you can't see things on a slant. That was like one of my favorite little lines in there.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
so I love that you've gone full circle from getting coached to now helping coach and helping inspire. But before we get to that, Catherine, I
Hmm.
got to warm you up. Like, we can't just jump into the deep end of the pool and get going.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to tell you, though, this warm up is a little challenging. I got to make sure you're
Okay.
ready for this. This is the stuff. This is some of the most critical stuff because it lets our audience know what's really going on back there.
All right.
So here's
I'm ready.
you ready? All right, here we go. First question. You are stranded on a deserted island and you get to
Hmm.
eat one food for the rest of your life. What will be at your dinner table?
Potatoes.
Ooh, sweet potatoes or white potatoes?
Can I have all the potatoes?
You can have all of them. It's your island. Yes, you can have all the potatoes.
I want all the potatoes, every flavor, every color. I want all the potatoes.
What are you going to do with those? You baking them? You frying them? Well, how do
Oh
you like your
my gosh,
potatoes?
there's like 600 things you could do with potatoes. You just reminded me, I actually am boiling some right now, and I should probably go turn the stove off before I forget. So hold on.
I didn't see that one coming, team. First time ever that our deserted island question reminded somebody they were cooking. What
Oh
are you
my gosh.
what are you
So
gonna do?
I had sweet potatoes in the oven, and then I had yellow potatoes boiling on the stove.
Oh, you're
Um,
not lying. You like potatoes.
I mean, it's the most complete food, right?
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, now I'm super intrigued to see where the second question reminds you and where you got to go.
Yes, okay.
All
I'm
right.
ready.
You get, Catherine, you get one superpower. It can be whatever you want, but I want to know what it is and what you want to do with it.
Ooh, I would love to see into people's souls, their hearts and their minds and their pain, and to be able to help them with those things inside them that they feel are unspeakable, that they feel like they can't tell anyone, and help them break free from the shame that's holding them back.
Mm, that'd be a good one. We could definitely use that one in the world. What is your favorite book?
Without a doubt, the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's been an answer a few times for sure in
I
5 years.
imagine. It's the best-selling book in the world of all
All
time, so it's
time.
probably got some good stuff in there.
All right, you get to have dinner with one person. This person could still be with us or may have passed. Who would you have dinner with and what would you want to ask them?
Mm, maybe my grandpa on my dad's side. I never met him.
Okay.
My dad is such a cool guy. I'd kind of want to know, like, how he raised my dad or what his thoughts were when he let my dad have a whole menagerie of animals and pets and allowed him to have a like horse and pet raccoons and like I don't know what made you want to give your boy all that freedom and all those animals and that might be kind of interesting because I think that really shaped my dad into be the lover of nature and the lover of animals and adventure.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
interesting. Your dad was an adventurer?
Yeah, he canoed like the boundary waters. He was like a secret agent in the intelligence service. I actually helped my dad last year put together a memoir called The Hundred Air, a memoir of generosity from the house painter next door. My dad had all these adventures in life, but then he just turned out to be a guy who paints houses. And um, it's about how to be generous when you don't have a
Mm.
lot. So instead of the millionaire, it's the hundredaire. How can you be kind and generous and giving to people when you feel like you may not have enough to meet your needs?
And you guys got to work on that together?
Yep, he had been writing for 40 years and never did anything with his writing. So went through thousands and thousands of pages of his stories and found the ones that had the nuggets that were about generosity and kindness. And I kind of put them all together and cut them. Like some of the stories were like 35 pages long, and I'd cut them down to like 8 or 9 pages. And so it's a nice memoir about simpler times and
Mm.
being kind to others.
I love it. How did he react to you doing that?
Honestly, I mean, this may be pretty bold and presumptuous to say, but I kind of think it saved his life. So he was almost, well, he was dying
Okay.
the about a year and a half ago, and they said they didn't know how to help him. His heart was enlarged twice the size it should be. I think from inhaling all the paint fumes all those years.
Sure.
Working in Minnesota, you didn't have the windows open for ventilation because it was cold, and his heart was double the rate it was supposed to be. And he's not the healthiest. He's overweight, and so he was in the hospital, and he was basically saying goodbye to everyone. He just knew this was it, and the hospital didn't know how they could help him. And so I had my husband make this book cover and put this book together. And I just wrote this letter. I was like, Dad, I know you've always wanted to write a book someday, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for you. So if you could just hang on, if you could just hold on till January, you're going to have your book out.
Mm.
And I think that gave him the hope to overcome and to recover. And then I went back to Minnesota last March and I launched this, and it got bestseller on Amazon in 3 different categories. And we got to do a book launch together. I have the video up on my YouTube
Oh, wow.
channel with me and my dad doing his book launch.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really special.
Yeah, and the feedback's been good for him. Has he enjoyed like the interactions from it?
Think so. I think so. He's like the little bit of a town celebrity amongst the old people, you know.
Hey, man, I love it. We all need somebody to look up to for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Katherine, you feeling warmed up now? You actually literally
I
got a
mean,
warm up because you ran to the potatoes and back.
I kind of feel like the hard questions are over now.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I want to start with something that I read that you had put somewhere
Okay.
that said you were believing in everyone else's worth but your own. You realized you couldn't continue to have faith in everybody but yourself. What kind of
Yeah.
led to that, and where were you at in life?
It's interesting because I was there for a long time. I was there for at least a couple of decades where I just thought everybody was more important than me. I had this low self-worth. I can't exactly pinpoint where it came from, if there was some specific incident, but I think just the more you get knocked down in life, um, I think the more you start to build a case study for these things.
Mm.
I remember an incident in the 3rd grade where I was rejected by friends, and I just thought, I'm not worthy. Like every day I would go out to play with my friend Carrie on the monkey bars. And one day I came out and there was a new girl with her on the monkey bars where I normally sit. And this new girl, her name was also Carrie. And I came out and I was like, running out in my jelly shoes in the 80s. And I was like, I saw this and I was like, I stopped for a minute trying to figure out where can I squeeze in. And my old friend Carrie, who I'd had for all these years, in her like sing-songy little 3rd grade voice said, You can't play with us anymore because your name isn't Carrie. It sounds so silly,
Yeah.
but my little heart at that moment made some kind of decision that I wasn't worthy.
Mm.
I wasn't worthy of having friends. And then, knock after knock after knock, whether you're rejected by boys or teachers are saying, you're not good enough, you're lying, wherever, all these places where you're getting this. And I think being an artist, having the heart of a poet, being an actor, I think I was more sensitive to those things. And I just took them all in and I made all these case studies against myself of why I'm not good enough,
Mm.
why I'm never gonna amount to anything. And then even though it's my favorite book, I would misinterpret some scriptures in the Bible to build a case against myself. Like
Mm.
when the scripture says, consider others better than yourself, or, it's about
Yeah.
putting others first. But I took that wrongly to mean that I am nothing, I am below, I am a doormat. And that's not what it's saying at all.
Sure.
Um, you know, but I took it that way.
Hmm.
So, all these case studies I built against myself of not being good enough. And then there had to be a shift. There had to be a time where I finally came to this realization, like I had this heart to help people, and I was always like giving my friends counsel and helping them out of situations, but I realized I wasn't doing that to myself. I wasn't helping myself. I would give my last penny to help someone, but if they wanted to help me, I'd be like, no, no, I'm fine. You keep like, I would not take any gifts. I would not take any compliments, that's for sure. If people would compliment me on my acting or how I look, I would just think, oh, they're lying, or what are they trying to get from me? I was
Mm,
so broken inside that I did not see my own wealth or value. Well, that was a
mm.
Freudian slip, I guess. My own worth,
Yeah.
value. I said wealth, but
Yeah.
I guess I didn't see that either.
No, it's
I
good.
didn't see my wealth or my worth.
Yeah. What was so when I hear that, right, and I know like we get in these self-talk loops sometimes, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
out of curiosity, whose voice did you hear when you were talking bad to yourself?
Hmm.
Whose voice would it be that you heard?
I'm sure there was little repeats or refrains from different people throughout my life, but I think it sounded like my voice
Yeah, yeah.
because that's the rattling in my head. But because of my worldview of being a Christian, I equate it now to like that was the devil
Mm.
telling me that was the enemy of my soul, telling me everything that was wrong with me, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Like I usually find people have a couple answers there. One is their own voice, right, which is
Yeah,
then their own, just themselves beating themselves down. Two, it's somebody else's voice. So whether it was that coach or that teacher or that critical parent that made you believe you weren't when you had that negative voice, that's the voice they took on. And it
yeah,
intrigues me and like how we overcome that, right? And how do we? Because we're all gonna have negative self-talk, right? It's
yeah,
part of how we protect ourselves. The ego is trying to protect you at times by
yeah.
sheltering you. How did you? I guess let me ask you two questions. One, how did you overcome it? But yeah, let's start with that. How did you get to a point where you're like, okay, that's enough of this. I'm gonna rechannel this to use it to my benefit.
Yeah. So to give you a clue, some of the things I was down on myself about were like, I didn't think I was smart enough. Like, I applied to get into my local college and I got rejected. But two of my friends who were in in special ed growing up got in. So I thought, I my friends who were in special ed got in and I couldn't even get in. So I just thought I am so dumb. I just thought I
Mm,
just was beyond. I didn't think I didn't think I looked good. I had like this body dysmorphia where I thought I was ugly and hideous, and it got bad. I talk about this in my book You Are Worthy, but it got to the point where I couldn't even look in the mirror without crying.
mm,
I was that disillusioned with how I looked. And so there was all that. But so I had these views of myself. And to get over them, I had to start challenging those voices and those beliefs. And a lot of it came from reading that book that I said is my favorite book,
mm,
reading the scriptures. There are scriptures that say, you know, I have used the weak things of the world. I have used the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And I was like, wait a minute. God can use somebody who's weak and a fool to confound the wise, to become. So I realized I didn't have to measure up. I didn't have to be good enough. I didn't have to be strong enough. I could just be a weak and a fool and God could still use me to make a difference in the world. It really like freed me up from that thinking I had to attain or that I had to be more beautiful, more
mm,
smart, more holy, more this or that to make a difference in the world. I realized God will just use anyone who's willing, who has a good heart and who's willing. And I could do that. I could have a good heart and be willing. And all the other skills don't matter because you get equipped along the way. It's almost like the moment you
mm,
step out on that skinny branch, you're going to learn how to fly or God's going to catch you. Either way, you're going to be good. But taking that leap of faith and stepping into it little by little and going, okay, I didn't die. Nobody threw tomatoes at me. I think I could get back on stage again. I think I could make another phone call. and sometimes it's just inching your way in. It's not always a big
Mm.
leap.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you said that, inching your way in and creating successes, right? Like
Mhm.
small successes continue to build momentum. And when you were saying that, I just had a word keep coming to me, and it sounded to me a lot like you started to give yourself some grace, right? That you
Mhm.
didn't have to be perfect. You didn't have to be all these things. That you were perfect just being you, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and I think that's so huge in this world today where it's easy to get caught up in thinking we're supposed to be something or look a certain
Right.
way, to give
Right.
ourselves grace for our imperfections, because really our imperfections are what make us unique.
Right. And we give grace to others.
Mm,
Like, how many times would you say something to yourself that you would never say to anyone else?
right.
You're like, you're such an idiot. Why'd you do? You would never say that to someone else. And like when we mess up, we like try something a couple times and it doesn't work out. We're like, well, I guess you're never meant to do that. Whereas, like, from being a parent, if your kid's trying to walk for the first time and they fall down 6 times, you're not like, well, I guess you were never meant to walk. You know, it sounds ludicrous to say that,
No.
but that's how we treat ourselves. Well, you already failed at 6 businesses, so you better not try one because,
Yeah.
maybe you're just not meant for that.
No, I love it. You're absolutely 100% right. We talk to ourselves in such a mean tone of voice that we would
Hmm.
never tolerate from a stranger on the street.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody could talk to us like we would, and that's critical to success. My next question for you then is, so you're going through this, and then you follow your heart into acting, which I've
Hmm.
never been an actor, but I've
Yeah.
I've talked to quite a few, and I've been around it. Getting good at hearing no in acting is like a skill, right? Because
Yeah.
it's part of it, getting turned down for roles. Quite
Yeah.
so how so that seems like it would be the opposite of where you would have been. So how did you get there? How did you go like, wait a
Totally.
second, I'm just going here?
Totally. That was extremely difficult for someone with no self-worth, such very low self-worth, getting told no constantly when I already felt like I wasn't enough was extremely painful. And even when I wasn't getting told no, because of my low self-worth, I would sabotage my
Mm,
opportunities. Like I was just telling a friend last night, I said, I remember one time I had this bikini audition, and so the night before, I went and ate 8 Krispy Kreme donuts, and I'm allergic to gluten. And my belly swelled up. I looked like I was 5 or 6 months pregnant. And I went to this audition bikini, and my stomach's all out here and bloated. I'm like, why did I do that? I so would sabotage myself. I look at back at that, I'm like, what? What were you doing?
yeah.
It's almost like, was I afraid of failure? Was I afraid of success? I
Mm.
don't know, but I had so many things that I just ruined for myself. And maybe your listeners can relate to this, maybe not in that arena, but how many times have you dated someone and they're just like great, and you mess it up, like you on purpose, legit, like don't call them back, or you mess it because there's something in you that doesn't feel worthy of that, or that job interview, and you everything comes up in the way and you are late because there's something about what you believe in your mind that isn't allowing you to do that thing. So the rejection, I actually talk about that a lot in the book You Are Worthy, because I have a lot about my story in Hollywood and how it relates to my worth. But one thing that really helped me overcome that rejection was realizing that I am not the body I live in. So
Mm,
in Hollywood, a lot of times you are not hired based on your talent. A lot of times it's based on your package,
sure.
because if you're already a movie star, you can play whatever role you want. But if you're just coming on as a bit player, you've got 2 lines, whatever, something coming on, they want to tell the audience who you are in a moment. So the second you get on screen, you need to recognize, is this the sleazy car salesman type? Is this the ditzy blonde? Is this the, whatever? So your package has to speak for you.
Mm,
And it wasn't until a lot of deeper research. And, I found the scripture that talked about how we are not the earthen vessels we live in. It's just a holding space for our spirit.
Right.
And when I realized the spirit is really the true me, this outer package is just my temporary housing unit, I was able to separate who I am from the body I live in. So when I got told no, because I mean, some of the rejections I got was like, you're too ugly, you're too pretty, you're too fat, you're too thin, like, I was so confused. I'm like, well, which one is it? You're
Right.
too pretty to be that fat, or you're too pale, you're too, and I would be like, I don't know. Shit. I remember I was up for a role recently, and there was two roles that they're like, well, you could play this role, but you'd have to learn a German accent and gain 50 pounds. Or you could play this one, but you'd have to learn a Swedish accent and lose 40 pounds. And I was like, I don't think I want to do either. Can't I just be me?
Yeah.
So it's almost like a ketchup bottle. I talk about this in the You Are Worthy book. If I see myself as a product, which a lot of times they call you in the industry, sometimes they're very cruel on sets, especially if you're a background actor. They affectionately or not so affectionately call you props that eat,
Mm.
because they were like, you're just in the background, you're just a prop, you're not like a human being.
Huh.
And so I'm like, okay, if I'm a prop, it's not determining my worth. This is just the package I live in. Maybe I'm a ketchup bottle. Maybe I'm the old-fashioned ketchup bottle that's glass, and that doesn't fit their futuristic story. They need the new ketchup bottles that are wider and fatter, where the label's upside down. They got the cap on the bottom. My housing unit's just not appropriate for the story that they're trying to tell. It means nothing about my worth or my abilities. It's just my housing unit doesn't fit. So if this is the house I live in, and they need a tiny home, or they want a brown house, or they want a two-tier one, and next time they're looking for someone who's like a white double wide trailer, then I'll get my shot. So it's not me. I'm just not right for the story they're trying to
Yeah.
tell. It's nothing to do with my worth.
Yeah, and I think that's a good life lesson for our listeners is that when you get negative feedback from places, if they're places you respect, right? Whether it's like in
Yeah.
your work, or a friend says, hey, you mentioned you were going to do this, but you're not following through on this, that accountability piece, we don't have to take feedback so personal, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
necessarily us, it's actions or a lack of actions at times.
Or sometimes it's someone else's perception of you
Mm,
that is not necessarily the truth. They're projecting something onto you because of something inside them
for sure.
that needs to be fixed. Like when we go to a movie theater and we're watching something and we see, oh, there's this yucky stuff on the movie screen. We don't blame the movie. We think that they need to clean the projector, because there's a lot of times people will project stuff onto you.
Sure.
We can feel like, especially when I had low self-esteem, I would believe every single person when they said something negative about me. And I would just be in my room crying and so upset. And when I first started writing, I had this writing partner, and we would get together at a coffee shop in LA, and we were working on this TV pilot. And he was getting so upset when he would use all these big $5 words. And I would be like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? This is before I had a phone that had like the dictionary app. I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And he wouldn't like just talk as a normal person. I think he had this thing of wanting to show how smart he was. He got so mad at me one day. He's like, I can't work with you. You can't even form a sentence. And I took that in, and I thought, when I started to feel like I want to write a book, I want to write a poetry book, that would rattle in my head. You can't even
Mm.
form a sentence. And that happened throughout. And it stopped me and blocked me every time I wanted to do like some kind of writing, write an article, write a book. I would remember that. And multiple people would say, well, you don't know grammar. You don't know the difference between a colon or a semicolon. I had a friend I had for a number of years, but she was so critical of me. And the last time we kind of got in an argument, she's like, you don't even know what a cardinal number is. I was like, does anybody? Like, what? I've never even heard of a cardinal number. Is that a thing?
So
So
how did you get to where you could not take that so personal? Did you have any strategies? Did you like
yeah.
what was
Well,
the tip?
like I said, realizing what people say about you often says more about them than it does you. So this particular friend of mine, she's got a master's degree in writing. She's a master's degree in like teaching. She's got all these degrees. And when I put my first book out and I invited her, the book lunch, I didn't realize the reason she was so mad at me is because she wanted to write a book and she hadn't done it
Mm,
yet. So
yeah.
she's looking at me like this person that doesn't even know.
Sure.
I think she was mad.
Hmm.
And so I had to realize, these people that are putting all these judgments on me, people that put judgments on you, sometimes it has nothing to do with you, and they're just projecting. They feel a certain way, like, well, how come I haven't done that when I've got all these fancy degrees and this person doesn't know a cardinal number is putting out a book. I think it gets, when you're alive and you're running after your calling and you're living your purpose and you're doing the things, and sometimes it helps to be ignorant. Sometimes it helps not to know how it's supposed to be done, so you actually do the thing. I
That's so
remember
funny you say that.
Yeah, I remember Marie Forleo saying once, if you're not embarrassed of the first thing you put out, then you waited too long. And how many of us get stuck in this loop of perfectionism, which is actually procrastination, which is actually fear of what people are going to say.
For
So I
sure.
say, put it out sloppy, put it out messy. When it says 80% as good as you can get it, put it out again.
Yeah.
I when I put out my books, guess what? I put out the first book I ever put out. I now have a second version because I was embarrassed of it. Then in 2020, when COVID happened, I put it out again and I rewrote every single poem in the book. And
That's
people were
funny.
like, why are you doing that? Why don't you just put out a different book? I was
Yeah.
like, because that's what I feel like doing. I feel like making all of those better. Now that I know how to be a better writer, I'm going to just redo them all and do a second edition. People thought I was crazy, but you know, people are going to think you're crazy because when you get your purpose and when you're called, not everybody's going to know what you're called to do. This is your vision. So,
Yeah. Go ahead.
okay, sorry, my little 5-year-old's coming in here. Honey, I'm on a podcast right now. Can you please shut the door? Thank you, sweetie. I heard
Yeah, I
I heard a
love it.
pastor say once, when God called you, it wasn't a conference call. And I just love that because people aren't going to understand you. They're not going to understand your vision. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that revelation hasn't been given to them. They don't
Yeah.
understand what you're doing. You probably got some pushback when you decided to do a podcast. People are like, why are you doing that? What are you going to get? Who's going to listen? But that's their hangups because of whatever they've been through, that they want to project that on you because they haven't been able to do it or they think it's bigger than something that can be accomplished. So it's not about you when you really think about it. It's about them. And if you just keep marching forward towards that thing that's pulling at you, that joy, that happiness, whatever it is, things are going to work out.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because I find this
Yeah.
to be very interesting in today's world too, is right. Um, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to want to be successful,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't feel like it's bad to want to be
No.
successful. But
Yeah.
I've come across people who feel almost like if I'm successful, I'm putting down somebody else, right? So we almost don't
Yeah.
promote our successes. We almost don't celebrate our
Yeah.
successes, which I think is just as bad as not even trying for them.
Yeah, yeah. And that comes from the scarcity mindset, that feeling of lack, that feeling of there's not enough out in the world. So if you have something, it takes away from me. But if you've ever read different kind of books on prosperity and all that kind of stuff, you see that mindset is completely wrong because, all the money in the world has not even been discovered yet. There's diamond mines that haven't been discovered yet. There's gold mines that haven't been discovered. The earth is perpetually renewing and we're always having more. If you come from the mindset where like I do, where you're like, oh, we were born in the garden, there's like Adam and Eve. There's a reason. I heard this from one of my mentors, Myron Golden. He said there's a reason we were born in like a garden and not a bakery. People who have that bakery mindset, that if you get a slice of pie, the pie is smaller and there's one less slice for me. And if you get a big piece, that means I only get a small piece. But if you're born in a garden and when you eat fruit, the more you eat, the more you spit the seeds on the ground, the more trees
Mm,
will grow. So the more you consume, the more there is for other people. So if you keep that mindset, you realize there's never going to run out. There's enough for everybody. What's meant for you is meant for you, and nobody can take it from you. You being uber successful, if you become a trillionaire, that doesn't mean I can't become a billionaire.
For sure.
You can't take from me, because what's meant for you is meant for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's why I like doing what I do, and that's why I enjoy the storytelling. Is it lets people know it's okay, right? It's okay to have doubts. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to wonder what if, but then it's also very necessary to step into it and to go.
Yeah.
And you're going to
And not
make
be
mistakes.
tied. Oh, sorry.
No,
Not
you're
be tied to
good.
the expectations or how the results, but to do the thing for the joy of doing the thing and feeling like you need to do the thing, whether it turns out or becomes successful or not, because in the process you're
Mm.
learning, you're growing, and it's working on you, even if it doesn't look like it's working out, it's working on you.
Yeah, and the process is so critical, and that's the part we can't skip. But I think a lot of us try to avoid it, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want, it's like the overnight star, right? We just want to have this dream and wake up tomorrow and it's true. But here, two thoughts I have is, if that happened, if it did happen, you went to bed tonight and you woke up tomorrow and every dream you had came true. One, you
Yeah.
wouldn't really appreciate it because it just
Mm-hmm.
happened. There's no fulfillment in the process. And two, you're not going to have learned the lessons along the way. It's kind of like the
Yeah.
people that win the lottery, right? They weren't very,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't good with the little money they had. They
Right.
woke up the next day, now they're billionaires.
Yeah.
And then in a couple of years, you read about they're back to where they were. Why? Because they
Yeah.
didn't have a process of getting better with money.
Right. Yeah. It's and a lot of people think if I have more of this or more of that, that's the answer. That's the solution I'm looking for. When in reality,
Mm,
if you were ready for more, you would have more, because you would have a different mindset. You'd be at that level. You would know what to do with what you had. You'd be making more. It's the
love
same
it.
thing. If you take someone who's already a successful business person and you strip them of all that they have, they would be able to get back to being a millionaire within a year. There was actually a TV
Yeah.
show that I saw that took like billionaires and millionaires and took everything from them, took their identity, put them in the middle of podunk nowhere with like $100 in their pocket. And they had to, within 60 days, have like $1 million business. And they did it over and over and over, because it's not the money, it's not the assets. People go, if I could just find a bag of money on the street. I've thought that, like the duffel bag I see across the street. What if that's filled with money? But that doesn't solve it if you're poor in here. It's going to
Yes.
be just gone because you don't know how to manage it. You don't know how to invest it. And the number one thing you can invest in is your mind. You're going to have that forever. And that's something nobody can take away from you. They can take your house, they can take your car. But if you've invested in yourself and your knowledge through books and courses and coaching, whatever, that can't be taken from you.
I love it. And invest in yourself and forgiveness, right? Moving
Mm,
past the things that you hold on to that anchor you to where you are. Letting
mm,
letting go, right? Like you talked about earlier, how we talk to ourselves. Like sometimes we're quick to forgive all the people around us, and we're quick to
mhm.
encourage them to move past whatever mistakes they have, but we don't necessarily do it ourselves. We
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
have that weight in our backpack forever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you just got to take it out and throw it, learn the lesson, and get rid of it.
Yeah, it's not serving you to carry it around. I had the same conversation with a friend of mine last night.
Yeah.
We were at like a seminar all day, and she was feeling bad about mistakes she made in the past. But I was like, you wouldn't hold that against me. If I told
Mm.
you I was sorry for doing something, why are you holding it against yourself? And we like to be our own worst critic sometimes. That's, I guess, a matter of not knowing your worth again.
Yeah, not knowing your worth. And I think it's awesome that you talk to her about it, because I think at times we don't have the right people in our circles that would challenge us on that thinking, right? Sometimes our
Yeah.
circles are in the same place we are, so then we kind of wallow in the same self pity.
Exactly, because we're like a homing mechanism, a beacon, and we're attracting the same kind of broken people that we are, because there's some kind of a comfort in that, right? That saying, misery loves company.
Yeah,
And like they say, if you're the smartest person in your circle, you got to get in a different circle.
Yep.
You got to get around some high achievers, and whether you need to get in a room, go to some mastermind, do whatever to be around. I remember the first time I ever went to a mastermind, I paid like $25,000 to go be around. I was like, I had no idea what they were even talking about. It was such high level. They were talking about funnels and lead magnets, and I was like, I had only heard funnel like a funnel cake at the state fair. I had no idea what any of them was talking about.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm in a room with all these high achievers, and it does something to your mind. It goes, you know what? Maybe it's possible for me. And that's why, like what you're doing, sharing stories is so important, because when you see someone that maybe you kind of relate to, and you see them overcome, it gives you that spark of boldness, like maybe it's possible for me. Telling our stories and how we overcame is the number one way. Like when I am buying products and courses, I'm looking at the testimonials. What is someone who looks like
Mm.
me, who's struggling with something I'm struggling with, how did this course help them? And if it helped them, you know what, maybe it will help me. And we don't realize sometimes we're ashamed of our past, we're ashamed of what we've been through, and we want to keep it to ourselves because we think they're going to judge us, they're not going to understand. And I really feel like this is one of the biggest lies that voice, that one of the biggest lies the devil tells us is that nobody can relate to the places you failed. Nobody can relate to your areas of struggle or sin or whatever you want to label. Nobody can relate to that. And then so you keep to yourself, you keep closed up. You're like, they're going to judge me if I let anyone know my story. They're going to not want to be my friend. They're not going to hire me if they know what I've been through. And the second part of the lie is, I feel like the devil tells us where we are the most gifted. He tells you that's common. Everybody's got that. You don't need to do that. You know, like for instance, most people you talk to say they want to write a book, but there's that voice saying, why, who would read your book?
Sure.
What do you have to offer? How are you any more special? Someone, this famous person already wrote a book on this topic. Who's going to read your book? So I feel like the devil tells us where our giftings are, we're common, and where our struggles are, oh, no one else has that. So then we keep to ourselves and we don't pursue our purpose and go after that thing that we're meant to do.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. There's a lot to that, and I think that's the beauty of the world we live in now versus, 50 years ago is you and I have never met anywhere but here, but we can
Yeah.
come together and talk and become friends, and now my circle interacts with your circle, and there's
Mhm.
somebody out there that's going to listen to this episode and find more value in you, right? And then come after you and learn from your story and share your story. And like what you did with your dad's book, right now people can continue to learn from his stories.
Mm.
And we're not just subject to geographical boundaries like we might have been 50 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. And the presence of the internet, man, if you were having certain feelings back in my parents' generation,
Right.
you keep that to yourself. You don't tell anyone. In my book, You Are Worthy, I talk about my suicide story. And when my parents read that, they were like so shocked. They were like, they're from this generation where you don't talk about that kind of stuff. You don't
Sure.
tell anyone of your struggle. And they were like a little upset with me of some of the stuff I put in that book. And I was like, but you got to realize this is going to help people. I don't need to be ashamed of where I've been, because it can be a launching pad to help others who are struggling in that area to know that there's hope, there's a way to overcome, there's a way to get through it. So we can't be so worried about people judging us. Guess what? People are going to judge you anyway. Whether you do the thing or you don't do the thing, they're always going to have judgments. So why don't you run after and do that thing that's in your heart? Either way, people are going to like it or they're not going to like it. But if you live your whole life afraid just based on what someone might say, then you are in your own prison and you're
Mm.
the jailer and you've got the key. You could let yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so critical. And quite honestly, I think there's so many times that we think we are where we are because of our past success, which to a degree is true, right? Which to a degree is true. But you're also where you are because of the lessons you learned when you weren't successful,
Mm,
or the struggles, or the imperfections, or the things we want to hide from that pretend they didn't happen to us or didn't happen in our life. But when
Oh,
you
yeah.
get to the end, like when you get to where you are today, like I wouldn't be who I am now without some of the struggles I went through. So I can't just erase that from my story and only have the Disney version of my life, right? The cartoon version, because it's the whole story makes you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I would love listeners to take in is, man, your whole story is valuable. Your whole story is critical to who
Yeah.
you are today. It's not half a story.
It's necessary. You
Yeah.
know, when you plant a seed goes into the ground, the seed has to die. It has to break open. It's
Mm.
in the dark. And you sometimes you feel like I'm in the dark, nobody can see me. I'm working so hard, nothing is happening. I'm not having any success. But that seedling has to break open and it has to start growing the roots. It can't spring up to success until the roots get down. And the deeper the roots go, the more success you can have, the bigger the tree can grow. If you just, the seedling just sprouted up, the first windstorm, you're
Yeah.
down. So these people that do reach these overnight levels of success, some child actors, some young singers, they don't have the character,
Mm.
the life experience to sustain them where they got. They didn't have the trials of tribulation. They didn't have the dark growing under the ground, getting their roots to sustain them. They fall out of the business. They turn to drugs. They get into all different kinds of things because they didn't have the characters to sustain where their talent took them.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. That process is important, and we can't skip the process, and we can't be ashamed of our process, right? You need to
Yeah.
embrace where the path we've been on and where we've been from. Katherine,
Yeah.
it's been awesome having you on the show this week. Where can our audience stay connected with you and kind of immerse themselves more in your circle?
Yeah, well, I would love to offer all your listeners a free gift. I made an online course out of this curriculum and went deep dive, and they can get 3 free video lessons to go deeper on their self-worth by going to freegiftfromcoachkat.com. That's K-A-T, freegiftfromcoachkat.com. And they can find me on YouTube and Instagram under Katherine Norland and Facebook and TikTok under Kat Norland,
Awesome.
Katnorland.
Awesome. Katherine, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Jerrod.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.